Just to make sure, you cannot see the participants list on the share screen, right? You only see the agenda.
Correct.
Okay, great.
I'd like to call the Central Virginia Transportation Authority to order. Again, this is your chair, Frank Thornton, and again, say good morning to each of you. And at this time, we would ask that you, in your own way, follow us with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, we'll have a statement if needed regarding our virtual meeting. Mr. Parsons.
Thank you, Mr. Thornton. We do not need to read the statement regarding our virtual meeting at this time live because we have had it published in our agenda packet. We were certainly doing everything we can to accommodate anyone who is attending or participating as a panelist, and would be happy to take any questions from the board at this point. Otherwise, we are free to move on with the agenda as listed.
Okay, and as I recall, this is our first virtual meeting. So for my colleagues and commissioners from the area, I'm sure we will adapt, and maybe this is a tool that we will use in the future. Okay, at this time, we'll have a roll call and certification of a quorum.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to start with Town of Ashland. Mr. Hodges.
Aye. Here. Excuse me, here.
Good morning. Charles City County. Mr. Coda. Chesterfield County, Vice Chairman Carroll.
I am here.
Goochland County, Mr. Spoonhauer.
Here. Good morning.
Hanover County, Mr. Peterson.
Here.
Henrico County, Chairman Thornton.
Here.
New Kent County, Ms. Page.
Good morning. Here.
Good morning. Powhatan County, Mr. Williams. City of Richmond, Mayor Stoney.
Here.
Virginia House of Delegates, Delegate McQuinn.
Here.
Senate of Virginia, Senator McClellan.
Here.
Commonwealth Transportation Board, Mr. Brown.
Here.
VDRPT, Ms. Mitchell.
Here.
VDOT, Commissioner Britch.
Here.
VRTC Transit System, Ms. Tim.
Here.
RMTA, Ms. Dean.
Here.
And I just want to take a moment and take a look at the list of attendees. I just want to make sure all of our members are listed as panelists and can participate.
I believe we're good, Nicole.
Thank you. That concludes the roll call for attendance, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Mueller. Okay, we go now to A1, consideration of amendments.
Sorry,
to-
I don't understand.
Pardon? Okay, we go now to a consideration of amendments to action of the meeting agenda. Are there any? Okay, hearing none. Hearing none, I'll go then to approval of October the 30th, 2020 CVTA action meeting minutes. Chair will entertain a motion.
So moved. John Hodges, Town of Ashland, so moved.
Seconded, Mr. Carroll.
Motion has been made and properly second. Are there any questions? Okay, roll call vote at this time.
Thank you. The authority will now be voting on item A2, the approval of the October 30 action meeting minutes. Ashland, Town of Ashland, Mr. Hodges.
Aye.
Charles City County, Mr. Coda. Chesterfield County, Vice Chairman Carroll.
Aye.
Goochland County, Mr. Spoonhour.
Aye.
Hanover County, Mr. Peterson.
Aye.
Henrico County, Chairman Thornton.
Aye.
New Kent County, Ms. Page.
Aye.
Powhatan County, Mr. Williams. City of Richmond, Mayor Stoney.
Aye.
Delegate McQuinn.
Aye.
Senator McClellan.
Aye.
And CTB, Mr. Brown.
Aye.
Thank you. That concludes the roll call for item A2.
Okay, thank you so very much. At this time, we're going to, what we have is open public comment period. Is there anyone who cares to speak? Or Madam Clerk, has anyone sent in any messages for us that we need to hear?
Yes, sir, Mr. Thornton. We have two email submittals of comments that we will share with the group. But I first wanted to recognize Nelson Reevely, who is attending today, and we are going to promote him to a speaking role. And he wanted to share comments to the CVTA from RVA Rapid Transit.
Thank you.
Bear with us. All right, Mr. Reevely, you should be live.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, good morning, CVTA members, staff, and everybody gathered here this morning. My name is Nelson Reevely, and I'm a resident of Henrico County in the Tuckahoe District, and I'm the Director of Operations for RVA Rapid Transit. And as many know, RVA Rapid Transit is an organization dedicated to education and advocacy for a regional public transportation system and the ways that robust transit helps people lead healthier, more productive, and more interconnected lives. The full vision for frequent, far-reaching public transit is captured in Plan RVA's Greater RVA Transit Vision Plan, and we're very thankful for the progress that's been made to date on this and for growing bus service in the city, in Henrico, and in Chesterfield. And we're very grateful as well for the establishment of the CVTA and the work that you all and staff have poured into getting it up and running. To bring the full regional vision for transit to reality, it's of course key to continue growing investments in public transit. And the returns on those investments are immense. They include residents being able to get to jobs and education, earning income, and charting career paths for themselves and their families. They include residents having reduced healthcare costs as they're able to more readily reach doctor's appointments, access nutritious food and grocery stores, and enjoy cleaner air. Those include residents being able to access key activity centers, resources, and amenities of our region, even and especially if they're not able to drive or own a personal vehicle. So many seniors, youth, folks with disabilities, people who can't afford the high cost of a car. And also the benefits extend, of course, to visitors, whether they're coming for play or for business, to be able to easily navigate our region when they're arriving by train or plane or bus. Ultimately, a comprehensive, effective public transit system will make our region a more inclusive and prosperous place to live, work, play, and visit. And we continue to encourage your work towards this end. And we thank you again very deeply for all the progress made to date. Grace and peace to you all.
Thank you, Mr. Ridley, for your comments.
And Mr. Thornton, I wanted to share, and I'm going to try and share my screen, the other comment that was received prior to today's meeting. And again, we will forward all the comments received to the board for your consideration. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
This was an email received from Mr. Carl Schwendeman asking, and I will just take a minute and read this. Good day, my name is Carl Schwendeman, and I would like to ask, could the Central Virginia Transportation Authority fund the construction of extending the Powhatan Courthouse Village sidewalks 1,200 feet east from intersection of Old Buckingham Road and General Scott Boulevard in 2021? I heard a project like this could cost between $200,000 to $720,000. My dream would be to extend the Powhatan Village sidewalks 2 miles east from the courthouse down Old Buckingham Road to the intersection of Academy Road and US Route 60. Powhatan County had a smart scale project to extend the Powhatan Village sidewalks west 0.7 of a mile from the end of sidewalk at Man Road and Old Buckingham Road. The sidewalk project got canceled due to the road projects benefiting US Route 60 getting onto smart scale. Is it possible that the Central Virginia Authority could fund this sidewalk project instead of smart scale? Or could it be possible for Central Virginia to fund a sidewalk project that would extend the Powhatan Village sidewalks east from Buckingham Road and Man Road for 1.3 miles west down Old Buckingham Road and Emmanuel Church Road to the intersection of US Route 522 and US Route 60? Also, could they fund the construction of new sidewalks from the intersection of Old Otterdale Road and US Route 60 across the double highway railroad overpasses, which need repairs, and could have the sidewalks run 0.4 of a mile to the intersection of North Otterdale Road? Huguenot Road between Robius Road and Huguenot Road and US Route 60 has a lot of missing 100-foot wide gaps in the sidewalks that need to be funded to fill in the missing gaps in the sidewalk system, along with some pedestrian crossings. It's not uncommon to see people walking around along these roads at 4 a.m. in the morning. Thank you.
Okay, well, we want to be very appreciative of those comments, and there is a process and how the CVTA does things, and we would hope that we would take this under advisement, and also those type of things could be shared with the representatives of those particular areas there. So here again, we are very appreciative of those comments. Okay, anyone else? Okay, if there are no other comments, we will bring the public comment period to a close. Again, we thank those citizens for taking part of that. Now we go to the chairman's report. With your indulgence, I will make my comments at the end. So at this time, let us go to the CVTA staff report, which is A5. Mr. Ewell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The CVTA Technical Advisory Committee has held 3 meetings since the last full CVTA meeting on October 30th. At the meeting held on November 9th, we focused on 3 items: the initial introduction and discussion of the project prioritization process being developed by the RRPTO, and how we may be able to integrate and or adapt that process to use for the prioritization process we'll need for the regional funding at the CVTA. So that will be an ongoing effort over the next several months. We also talked about the Transit Governance Report draft scope, which we reviewed and recommended for this body's approval at this morning's meeting. And we also worked on and reviewed the 2 supplements for the revenue transfer agreement with VDOT. The focus was on the standard project agreement for funding and administration between the CVTA and VDOT, which members had a number of comments and questions, which resulted in several rounds of follow-up and action items between technical staff, VDOT, and respective councils. We'd like to extend our appreciation to Commissioner Britch and his staff for working with us in great detail on that effort. 2 special call TAC meetings were held on November 20th and December 2nd to resolve all remaining concerns in order to provide a recommendation for your approval at this morning's meeting. The next TAC meeting is scheduled for next Monday, December 7th. In addition to updates on progress on the regional public transportation plan and on the transit governance report, we'll begin discussion on process and responsible parties for various workflow tasks that the authority will be responsible for over the coming years. That's the end of my report, unless there's any questions.
Are there any questions for Mr. Ure for the CVTA Technical Advisory Committee update? Anyone? Okay, if there are no other questions for Mr. Ure, I had mine on mute. I apologize. So you didn't hear what I was saying. I was talking to myself. So we thank you, Mr. Ure, for that report. Now we go to 5B, the finance report from the mayor.
Thank you, Chairman Thornton. It has been a great honor to work with some of the members of the Finance Committee on some key financial policies to help move the authority forward. With the assistance from the Finance Director Working Group, which consists of finance directors from each of our localities, we have been working on a number of items that will be brought before you today for consideration. I'm committed to moving the authority forward, and we will work to have by our next meeting a path forward for general banking, investments, procurement, audit, and overall financial management. Lastly, I want to urge the committee to include minority businesses in its day-to-day business actions. I've asked the Finance Committee review and recommend a diversity and inclusion policy for future CVTA purchasing and procurement functions. Mr. Chairman, that's my report.
Okay, are there any questions for the mayor? Mr. Mayor, I want to thank you for this report, particularly your seminal statement about inclusion, very important. And we thank you so very much for having guided that committee in the first part, okay? Thank you so much. Any questions, anyone else? Okay, this time we go to new business. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We go to new business, B1. Ms. Heater?
Good morning. Thank you very much. Excuse me. Good morning. Thank you very much. I would like to introduce to you the item for the administrative and operating expense budget. Last month, the authority approved publication of the included fiscal year 2021 administrative and operating budget for public comment. This morning is the scheduled public hearing for this item. Members of the public have the opportunity to provide input to you regarding the proposed spending plan. As a reminder, this budget is specific to the administrative and operating costs and is not inclusive of the majority of the revenues at the disposal of the CVTA for investment in critical transportation projects throughout the region. The administrative and operating budget was advertised in local newspapers and online, as well as information and guidance to members of the public to provide comment. Members of the public may give comment this morning. If you're on YouTube, you may do so by clicking on the Zoom meeting link so that you can come into the meeting as an attendee and sign up in the Q&A function of the Zoom meeting. Ms. Mueller, has anyone signed up to participate in the public comment hearing?
Ms. Cedar, no, I don't see anyone signing up for it at this time.
And did we receive any public comments in advance of the meeting?
We have not.
Mr. Thornton, given that we haven't had anyone sign up to give comments during the hearing in the advance of the meeting or currently, would you like to proceed with closing the public comment, closing the public hearing?
Let's proceed.
Okay, thank you. You should be able to see the proposed fiscal year 2021 administrative and operating budget on your screens. The Finance Committee has reviewed this and it was presented to the authority at your last meeting. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any. Staff is requesting action on this item and recommends approval of the fiscal year 2021 administrative and operating expense budget.
Are there any commissioners who have questions that they would like to ask about this administrative and operating expense budget? Okay, if not, the
Mr.
chair.
Chairman, this is Canova Peters. This is Canova Peterson. I will move for approval.
Mr. Carroll seconds.
Okay, we've heard motion for approval and a second. Are there any other questions? Okay, this time, if there are none, we'll have a recorded vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Town of Ashland, Mr. Hodges.
Aye.
Chesterfield County, Vice Chairman Carroll.
Aye.
Goochland County, Mr. Spoonhour.
Aye.
Thank you, sir. Hanover County, Mr. Peterson.
Aye.
Henrico County, Chairman Thornton.
Aye.
New Kent County, Ms. Page.
Aye.
Powhatan County, Mr. Williams.
Aye.
City of Richmond, Mayor Stoney.
Aye.
Delegate McQuinn.
Aye.
Senator McClellan.
Aye.
And CTB, Mr. Brown.
Aye.
Thank you. That concludes the roll call for item B1.
Okay, thank you so very much. At this time, we go now to B2, agreement for revenue transfers with Virginia Department of Transportation, standard project agreement for funding and administration. Mr. Parsons.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. As you recall, at your last meeting, you approved the overall, actually the front side of the MOA, and we learned following the meeting that in order to move towards a full consideration by the Commonwealth Transportation Board at their December meeting, that the CVTA needs to consider the full agreement for revenue transfers, including the standard project agreement and the other attachments as presented. So the TAC, the Finance Working Group, the Finance Committee, the Council of Councils, all the legal representation from each jurisdiction have all been working very hard since the October authority meeting to work through the language in this, and I think we're all very appreciative of the support and the consideration of VDOT as we try to do the right thing and be very deliberate in developing the agreement so that it satisfies everyone's needs. And I'm pleased to say that we are able to present that in full for your consideration today. I think that we do have, the request was that the authority consider the full scope of the agreement, including all of the attachments and exhibits. We have posted that agreement in full on our website on the meeting page for the CVTA. I do want to recognize that we one of the attachments is actually an Excel spreadsheet, and we did not print that entire thing for consideration as part of this packet, but it has not changed. I have it available and can certainly share that on the screen if needed, but I really wanted to give Mr. Gregory a few minutes to provide a summary of the considerations that were made and the changes in the SPA that were considered as we move through this discussion. So if it's okay with you, Mr. Thornton, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Gregory for a quick summary.
Yes, please do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Parsons, for that introduction. I would echo Mr. Parsons' comments that the TAC and all the local legal counsel have been working very hard on particularly the special project agreement with VDOT since you last met and approved the MOA. We have put that all together now into a single package to include the revised SPA for your consideration today, so that upon approval, it can be put forward to the CTB for its consideration and approval next week at their regularly scheduled meeting. The TAC worked very closely with VDOT, Commissioner Britch, Shane Mann, Laura Farmer, and their legal counsel to make substantive changes to the draft SPA that was presented to us originally. The new SPA that's incorporated into the MOA is more reflective, I would say, of how locally administered projects are handled between localities and VDOT, at least in the Richmond area. Most of the guidance for that was provided, thankfully, by Barb Smith and Jeff Minks from Chesterfield County. Their leadership on a lot of those changes was instrumental, and I appreciate that and wanted to recognize that good work. So some of the main elements in the SPA that were changed had to do with the fact that currently the CVTA does not have an executive director. So the question was, who would be the go-between, who would be the point of contact for the CVTA and VDOT as those projects unrolled. And what we did was insert in the place of executive director, we replace that with CVTA authorized representative, which can change under the auspices of that agreement from project to project, depending on the needs of the CVTA and the locality involved in that project. So it could be, for instance, the somebody on staff from the CVTA, or it could be a local representative. In addition, some changes that were made reflected the philosophy, which is commonly pursued in these sorts of projects, to spend federal money first. So if there is excess money for a project, you spend the federal money and then the state money, and then you would spend the CVTA money on these projects. And if there are savings, those savings would be enjoyed first by the CVTA and then the state and then the federal. So it's to the benefit of the CVTA and of course to VDOT, and that's how those funds are expended and savings allocated in other contexts as well. So we believe that's consistent. Otherwise, the agreement we believe is in good shape. And as Mr. Yor mentioned earlier, the TAC is recommending approval, and I certainly concur with that recommendation. And unless there's any questions, I will end my comments. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gregory. And for the general public, I've always been sensitive to letters that we use. So SPA stands for Standard Project Agreement. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the VDOT Standard Project Agreement.
I second it, Mr. Carroll.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman, if I
Yes.
might, I'm sorry, I've focused on the SPA, the Standard Project Agreement in my comments, but if the motion could be to approve the MOA inclusive of all the exhibits and attachments, that would probably be best. So we have a full package.
Okay, so the two gentlemen, you agree to that? That's the
Yes.
understanding? Okay?
Yes.
All right. All right, okay. At this time, is there any other input? If not, we'll have a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Town of Ashland, Mr. Hodges.
Aye.
Charles City County, Mr. Coda.
Aye.
Chesterfield County, Vice Chairman Carroll.
Aye.
Goochland County, Mr. Spoonhour.
Aye.
Hanover County, Mr. Peterson.
Aye.
Henrico County, Chairman Thornton.
Aye.
And New Kent County, Ms. Page.
Aye.
Powhatan County, Mr. Williams.
Aye.
City of Richmond, Mayor Stoney.
Aye.
Delegate McQuinn.
Aye.
Senator McClellan.
Aye.
CTB, Mr. Brown.
Aye.
Thank you. That concludes the roll call for item B2.
Thank you. Okay. At this time, now we go to B3, Insurance Services, Ms. Heater.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This item is an update and a request for you. The authority authorized release of a request for proposals, which has occurred for the procurement of insurance services for the authority. The submission period for those proposals was closed on November 13th, and the Finance Committee agenda for December 9th includes review and evaluation of the received proposals. This morning, we are requesting consideration of the authority to authorize the Finance Committee to proceed with the selection of the preferred provider and to procure those insurance services. Should the authority prefer to retain the responsibility, the body as a whole, the findings and recommendations of next week's Finance Committee meeting will come back to you at your next scheduled meeting. Then we would subsequently proceed with procurement of the coverage. Staff does recommend the delegation of this responsibility to the Finance Committee to expedite the purchase of these services, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions from Ms. Heater? Okay, the chair would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, this is Mr. Carroll. I would move for approval for the CVTA Finance Committee to be authorized by this full body to negotiate and purchase the insurance coverage.
Dolores McQuinn, second.
Hey, thank you so very much. At this time, a roll call, please.
Thank you. Town of Ashland, Mr. Hodges.
Aye.
Charles City County, Mr. Coda.
Aye.
Chesterfield County, Vice Chairman Carroll.
Aye.
Goochland County, Mr. Spoonhour.
Aye.
Hanover County, Mr. Peterson.
Aye.
Henrico County, Chairman Thornton.
Aye.
New Kent County, Ms. Page.
Aye.
Powhatan County, Mr. Williams.
Aye.
City of Richmond, Mayor Stoney. Delegate McQuinn.
Aye.
Senator McClellan.
Aye.
And CTB, Mr. Brown.
Aye.
This concludes the roll call for item B3.
Thank you. Now for item B4. And for item B4, Transit Service Governance Report, Scope of Work, Mr. Parsons.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. As you know, one of the requirements of the legislation enacting the CVTA was that the authority needs to consider transit service governance in the region and prepare a report of its findings to be sent back to the governor and the General Assembly. The date that this was one of the first items of business that the authority is required to do. And I bring to you today an update on that task. We have been working diligently to develop a draft scope of work for that process and the development of that report. And if we can scroll down to the staff report, is that possible? The scope of work for the study, as you can see, has been included in the agenda packet. That's good right there. Thank you. The report shall evaluate the governance structure of transit service in the Richmond region, including the evaluation of establishing a transportation district, and report the results of such evaluation to the governor and the General Assembly. The date that was included in the legislation was December 1st, 2020. If you remember, this was pre-COVID, and we have been in close conversation with the Secretary of Transportation's office as we've moved through the establishment and the organization of the authority. And our understanding from those conversations is that date is not binding for the submittal of the report itself. And we feel good about the scope of work that we are presenting to you today. What is asked of this body today is to approve the scope of work and enable the staff to move forward with and coordinate with the Department of Rail and Public Transportation to utilize its consultant bench. And these are pre-qualified professional consultants that can be utilized to do the scope of work as presented and provide a report back for the governor and the General Assembly. This report, as it stands now, has a number of milestones included, and those are listed in the scope of work. But our expectation is to have the bulk of the report finished by the end of March, with a submittal of the final report to the Governor and General Assembly no later than June 30th, so that it is still submitted in this fiscal year and meets the requirements and the expectations, considering the delays and upheaval that we've experienced in organizing the authority and just making sure that we are doing everything correctly as our chair has stated on numerous occasions. So what we're presenting now, the requested action, is approval of the scope of work for the Regional Transit Service Governance Report as presented, and authorization of the staff to solicit proposals for service. I do have one final piece of information that is included in the agenda packet, and this is a draft of a letter back to the Governor and General Assembly explaining kind of our current situation and the background to the discussions that we've had with the Secretary of Transportation's office, and lays out our milestones and expectations for submittal of that report. So we're transparent to the public and interested parties in terms of why we are not meeting that December 1st deadline and the reasons behind it, and our intentions to carry this through as required by the legislation. Be happy to take any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions from Mr. Parsons? Okay, Ms. Parsons.
Mr. Chairman, I don't have any questions, but I do have some comments.
Yes, Mr. Brown.
Well,
yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Stoney from Richmond, and as a longtime stakeholder in transit here in the region, it is my hope that the outcome of this report provides the region GRTC governance options that include whether there's a need for the establishment of a transportation district. It should also help us determine what the pros and the cons of GRTC not becoming a transportation district, and also identify options that include a new or an enhanced governance structure that can guarantee representation of local contributors, leveraging of CVTA funds through bond and tolls, as well as assist with the development of policies and processes to ensure equity, accountability for all of our regional stakeholders. I know that this undertaking is new to Central Virginia, but I have full confidence that we can come to a conclusion that will be right and proper for the entire region collectively. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for those comments, and those statements and ideas will be taken on advisement. Mr. Brown.
I had no comments, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, all right. Okay, the chair would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, this is Vice Chair Carroll. I would make the motion that we authorize the governor's report to move forward as presented and authorize staff to work with DRPT to solicit proposals for service.
Do we have a second?
Mr. Chairman, Canova Peterson, I'll second.
Okay, we read motion has been properly seconded. At this time, we have a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Town of Ashland, Mr. Hodges.
Aye.
Charles City County, Mr. Coda.
Aye.
Chesterfield County, Vice Chairman Carroll.
Aye.
Goochland County, Mr. Spoonhour.
Aye.
Hanover County, Mr. Peterson.
Aye.
Henrico County, Chairman Thornton.
Aye.
New Kent County, Ms. Page.
Aye.
Powhatan County, Mr. Williams.
Aye.
City of Richmond, Mayor Stoney.
Aye.
Delegate McQuinn.
Aye.
Senator McClellan.
Aye.
NCTB, Mr. Brown.
Aye.
This concludes the roll call for item B4. Mr. Chairman, if I would be allowed to circle back to item B3, I was not able to capture a vote from the City of Richmond. The motion for item B3 was to authorize the CVTA Finance Committee to select a qualified offer and negotiate purchase of insurance coverage for the CVTA. Mayor Stoney, would you be able to cast a vote?
Yes, my apologies. Aye.
Thank you very much. This concludes the roll call for item B3. Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, now we go to B5, CVTA Financial Administration and Management.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am going on this.
Excuse me, this time I would like to introduce Ms. Heater to introduce this, to bring this to us.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. As Mayor Stoney indicated during his report this morning, we have been working with the finance directors from the member jurisdictions of the authority, as well as the finance committee, to develop the various mechanisms that need to be in place for financial administration. Definitely, we've had particular focus on the near-term needs to establish generalized financial policies and procedures and carrying out the day-to-day broader financial administrative functions. Through your action earlier this morning with the VDOT transfer agreement moving forward to the CTB for approval later this month, funds that have been collected since July 1 will be available for release in short order. And so we are working quickly to be able to make sure that everything is as it should be for the authority to be able to receipt and disperse those funds in a timely manner. At last month's Finance Committee meeting, we presented and discussed the concept of leveraging one or more of the local government's vendor agreements and financial management capacity through development of a fiscal agent agreement. And the Finance Committee directed staff to continue working on developing that plan. Since that time, we've been working with a number of staff members throughout the localities, but I'd like to recognize Megan Coates from Henrico and Matt Harris from Chesterfield County, who have been of tremendous assistance during this time. Kathy C. from Hanover County has also offered a lot of guidance and support, Sheila Rollerson has been an active participant in the discussion, as well as several other staff members who have provided a lot of information to all of us about vendor agreements, terms, contracts, what have you. Draft financial policies and a sample fiscal agent agreement are included in your packet this morning for information only. These documents have not yet been reviewed by the Finance Committee, but they are scheduled for their review during the December 9th meeting next week. Our action that we're requesting of you today is to authorize the Finance Committee to establish financial management policies for the authority and to identify the necessary services and responsible parties to carry them out through a fiscal agent agreement. Again, these documents are scheduled for review and deliberation by the Finance Committee on December 9th. We know that specific financial services are of great importance, including the establishment of the banking accounts and the receipt and disbursement procedures for revenues that will be soon ready for release from the state. Staff's recommendation is to delegate these responsibilities to the Finance Committee. Absent that action, the Finance Committee would review and provide recommendations back to the authority for your review next year so that we can move forward with these activities. I am happy to answer any questions, and I also know that Megan Coates and Matt Harris are here on the meeting line if you have any questions with regard to the process, how we've gotten to where we are. But I will reiterate that the Finance Committee will be taking these documents up at their meeting on the 9th.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Mr. Hodges, Town of Ashland. If it's appropriate, I'd like to ask Ms. Heater a question.
Certainly, yes.
The town manager raised an issue. Towns are a little quirky in terms of distribution of local funds, and I won't bore the commission with the quirkiness, but we hope that the matter can be addressed I plan to support the motion, but hope the issue of distribution of funds to towns can be addressed.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Hodges. The town manager and I have spoken, and I have forwarded that inquiry with regard to tracing the revenues through the two sources and how that will be documented on the state side so that we can understand that. And we will be working with town staff to be able to make sure, as well as with Hanover County staff, to make sure that the distributions are as they are expected and are appropriately calculated. I know that school age population is one methodology for the tax distribution, and origin of tax receipt is the other. And so we will be working to clarify that for the town and the county.
Thank you, Ms. Heater.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Mayor, have any comments?
My comments, Mr. Chairman, is, I wanted to know, is this the set template on the way we have to operate the finances, or are there other options and alternatives out there?
Mr. Thornton, this is Megan. I'm happy to take that for you if you'd like.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, to your question, no, we have lots of flexibility here. What we have presented to you on the financial policies and procedures are really a derivation of what we found in Northern Virginia that we adapted to work with what we need to do here for CVTA. On the fiscal agent agreement, I'll let Mr. Harris jump in more there. But we did do an analysis of what the shared services are across the region and tried to find the fastest way to get all of these services in place. And to be able to touch the vendors who cover the most localities. And so that's why you see the recommendation that you do in front of you. That said, we're completely open to your feedback, and we're happy to work over the course of the next week before this goes to the Finance Committee to make any updates that you might find to be beneficial. I heard your earlier comment about minority businesses and procurement, and we'll be sure to add that before next week as well.
Okay, other comments?
Mr. Chairman, this is Matt Harris from Chesterfield. Just to tag on to that on the fiscal agent agreement side so that everyone's on the same page. Again, similar to what was done with the policies, we used a model that's already in place in the region for the convention center, and that's really the structure that we used and brought forward for consideration here. I do think that the convention center model has been very successful. It's been in place for a long time. I think everyone's comfortable with that. And so that's why we chose that model. I do think there's a lot of reasons why having the fiscal agent grouping with one particular locality makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of synergies. It becomes somewhat inefficient to cut it up any more than that. So that's why we have structured it that way. At the end of the day, our simple goal of staff was, as Ms. Coates says, to get this done as quickly as possible so we can have the accounts opened. We are in position now to have those in place almost by the end of next week if they're approved on the 9th. And we're able to do this at a basically no cost from an administrative overhead perspective, which again maximizes the dollars that can go back into all the projects that everyone is more concerned about. So those were our guiding principles, but we're certainly, as Ms. Coates says, open to any feedback that the committee might have.
Okay, are there other comments? The chair would just like to say that, as we are putting in the foundation for this august new organization, that we want to make sure that we have this approach that's been mentioned by several of the commissioners that are being inclusionary. So let's make sure in all the things we do, we want to be as inclusive as we can. All right. Are there other statements or questions on this regard? Not, the chair will entertain a motion.
Chair is Mr. Carroll. Make a motion to authorize the CVTA Finance Committee to develop the financial policies and procedures and implement a strategy for locality management of the key financial measures.
Mr. Chair, David Williams, I second the motion.
Okay, motion is made and probably second. Roll call time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Town of Ashland, Mr. Hodges.
Aye.
Pardon, if I may, I think there might be a discussion.
Oh, excuse me, was there someone, other discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I thought we were going to discuss before we got to the motion, but I wanted to just add that, as we continue to embark on establishing some of these financial policies and the financial management practices for the CVTA, I think it's very, very important that localities, both large and small, feel comfortable with how CVTA finances are going to be handled and managed. And it's my suggestion and recommendation as the Finance Committee Chair that the ad hoc committee made up of each locality's finance directors be formally some sort of working group or subcommittee of the finance work. Then in that capacity, I think that the Finance Committee can direct them to provide options for fiscal agent roles that potentially more than one locality can serve, not just one sole locality. There might also be a need for, I think, a locality to act as a financial clearinghouse of some sort for the CVTA as well. I think it's important that these efforts are led by localities and their staff in the early development process of this authority, and it is my hope that we can see to that moving forward.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor, for that seminal information and suggestion. And particularly, you've heard us say in the past, we are one family. And I noticed that you were very inclusive of the larger counties and smaller counties, okay? Very appreciative of that, okay? All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes?
Patricia Page in New Kent. It would be my desire that the comments that Mayor Stoney made, that they would be included in the motion.
I second that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, does the maker of the motion do approve of that, those changes?
I'm fine with the change.
Okay, and the person who seconded, do you approve?
Yes.
Okay. Roll
Mr.
call.
Chairman,
Yeah, okay, excuse me, Mr. Gregory?
I'm sorry to interrupt. I would, the action requested that is before you and which Mr. Carroll moved a moment ago, and the subsequent recommended amendments to that motion, just for sake of clarity, if it could be I might suggest that the motion be amended to say, and I'm sorry, I'm doing this off the cuff, but motion to authorize the CVTA Finance Committee to develop financial policies and procedures and implement a strategy for locality management of key financial management functions on the authority's behalf through negotiation of one or more fiscal agent agreements, and for the appointment of a finance director working group representative of the localities for consultation and and completion of delegated tasks as directed by the Finance Committee, if that will suffice. I think I tried to capture what Mayor Stoney wanted to incorporate, but.
Okay, could I get?
I can always send it to you.
Don't ask me to say that again.
In other words, just add, Mr. Chairman, an ad hoc committee with some more eyes.
Correct.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman,
so
this is Mr. Carroll. I'm fine with the amended motion as suggested by Mr. Gregory.
okay.
Now, thank you, Mr. Carroll. Mr. Chairman, if I might just interrupt one more time, I will advise that with the creation of that kind of subcommittee structure, rather than just a staff working group, that subcommittee would then become a public body, much like the TAC. So meetings of that subcommittee would have to be public and would be subject to FOIA like everything else. Right now, it's a sort of an informal staff working group, which is not subject to FOIA. But if you incorporate them into the committee structure of the body of the CVTA, then it becomes another public body of the CVTA. So they would have to have those same FOIA compliance requirements in place. Just advising you of that.
So Mr. Gregory, Mr. Chairman, this is Carlos Brown. I guess a question to Mayor Stoney was that your intent to create a formal body, or was it to simply recommend that the finance directors or committee or organizations in the various jurisdictions collaborate, as necessary prior to bringing recommendations to the formal finance committee for consideration?
Mr. Brown, was that question to me or?
It was a question to you. Was that your intent to create a formal body, or was it simply to encourage collaboration and inclusion in the development of policy?
I think it's, Mr. Brown, I would say it's twofold. I'd like to see obviously the continued collaboration amongst the localities, but also I think a little transparency and accountability in this on this front would be beneficial for the entire region, entire authority as well. And so, I think we can continue with our collaboration amongst the directors of of said localities, but also open up the process a little bit to all of the localities involved in the CVTA.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yes, Delegate McQuinn. I think in taking on this responsibility and trying to create a foundation the foundation for the CVTA, that we want to start off right. And I think that, as the mayor has said, that just in the spirit of transparency, making sure that we are engaging, people across the board, but not only that, and it's always good for the public to me sometimes to be involved and to know what's going on. So I would hope that there would be no hesitation to move this process as proposed by the mayor forward. I think it's good for what we're doing. And again, I think that we're getting off on a great footing. And if we adopt this process. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Gregory?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I noted earlier, the unique benefits of having a staff working group more informally is that they can meet without being subject to FOIA. They're not subject to FOIA that way, and it allows them to be more nimble in how they tackle the tasks set for them by the body. Having them serve on a subcommittee is certainly a good idea, but the smaller localities may not have the resources or availability to participate in that kind of a formal structure on a regular basis. And if a formal structure like a subcommittee is created, it may compel their participation when they don't have the resources to be able to do that. So I just offer that for consideration. Either way, of course, it's the CVTA's prerogative. And certainly FOIA compliance is one of the main things we always work to accomplish. But just wanted to throw that out there that the working group is an effective way to handle these things if you want to keep it less formal.
Okay, appreciate those comments. Why don't we just
Mr. Chairman. Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, Mr. Chairman, Carol. I appreciate what the mayor's points are. I think that staff has worked collaboratively with all of the regionally, with both all of the localities that are part of the CVTA. I don't think there's any intention to not be transparent in this process. But I'm going to withdraw my agreement to the amended motion. And the reason is I think that there is a model in place already that's been proven to work. I also think that there has been collaboration amongst the localities to come up with this proposal. I think that this is something that the CVTA Finance Committee on its own, which is a public meeting, could take care of. There's no problem with having the staffs of the authorities of the localities that continue to work together on the proposal prior to our meeting, which is coming up on the 9th. And so I'm gonna withdraw my agreement on the amended motion. I'll go back to my original motion. I think this is something that the Finance Committee can handle, and we can continue to work together collaboratively as we have been, all of the localities, on this issue. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Nova Peterson. I would like to second Mr. Carroll's, I don't know, second his motion. I don't mean to do that because that's already Mr. Williams. But the comments Mayor Stoney, Delegate McQueen that have made are all valid and valuable. But I think what we're doing today is trying to do the Finance Committee's work in our full format. And I think all these things need to be part of our next Finance Committee and discussed at that point in time.
What the chair would suggest at this time is let's carry the motion through and let the Finance Committee kind of work on that. I think the Finance Committee can put the things in place that they need. Does that sound plausible to the commissioners?
Well, Mr. Chairman, as the chairman of the Finance Committee, I would say that this needs to be at the top of the agenda. Because, you know, as the one of the larger localities involved in the CVTA, I want to ensure that our staff and the staff of other localities are going to be at the table as well. And so something I can certainly take up at the next Finance Committee at the top of the agenda for sure.
Okay, well, with that understanding, let's carry this through and let's let the Finance Committee kind of work on that. And remember that what we starting off, that make some comments at the end. Any other comments on this?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, can I ask for the current motion to be repeated so I'll know what I'm voting on?
I could try to provide some clarity, and I'll certainly defer to the chairman, Mr. Chairman, if you would like me to do that, or
Please.
Okay. As I understand it, Mr. Carroll, I believe your motion now, per your rejection of the offered amendment, remains as requested. So the action requested and your motion is consistent with item B5 on the agenda. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, this is Patricia from New Kent. My request would be, after this motion, is to then make a motion that this item does come on the agenda of our next CVA authority meeting regarding the motion to make sure that localities are included. And that being, with everything that's being done, I feel as though, yes, you are working with localities, and I just want to make sure that I'm doing my due diligence to make sure that this continues and that we do have it in form of a resolution or policy.
And the suggestion of the chair is not antithetical to what you're saying here, but what we're just saying is we're thinking that the finance committee can do that. Okay, we're gonna give them an opportunity to do that. Okay, did we get a second?
Mr. Chairman, just point of order. I do want to clarify this, because I think it matters how we are interpreting this language, and I think the question is, are we delegating to the finance committee or simply having the finance committee develop the policy to come back to the board? And I think in reading the proposed motions language, it's not clear whether we are delegating or whether we're simply asking the committee to do the work and bring it back. And I think what I'm hearing, some of the commissioners say is that they want it to come back to this body as opposed to simply being a delegation. Is that correct? I think that's what I'm hearing from a representative from New Kent.
Okay, well, to me, that's part of the process. It comes back.
If I may, from a staff perspective, the staff recommendation was to assign these responsibilities, delegate them to the finance committee to be able to move forward with the specifically to be able to move forward with the establishment of the banking account, transfer can do that, and to be able to disperse the local government revenues to the jurisdictions pursuant to the 50% distribution. Certainly, without that action, you are correct, Mr. Chair. The process would be that the committee would make recommendations as an advisory body back to this board, and the authority would have final approval at your next or subsequent meetings thereafter. We hear you on the.
I would hope that we would not make this too arcane and difficult. I think what we can do is make sure that we go ahead and carry this. What we're saying is, what I hear is we will carry this through to the finance committee, and the finance committee in its endeavors will also discuss some of these things, and things have to come back to the main group there. But also we want to keep make sure that all family members are part of this. And I don't want us to be going in different directions. So what the chair is hearing, I'm thinking, is that once we clear this milestone and carry this through, it'll go to the finance committee. The finance committee, in its wisdom, will look at this and maybe bring back a recommendation. The whole thing about transparency is very important. And I think that we can work this out. And I just think we don't want to make it too difficult at this juncture.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, Vice Chair Carroll.
Mr. Carroll?
I don't think anybody's trying to create a difficulty here. I think what we're trying to do is to move the process forward, which is why there's been discussion within the localities leading up to this meeting. This is for lack of anything else, this, as explained, this is a time sensitive in nature, and the fact that there is money that now is going to be available to be sent to accounts, but we're not going to have accounts established, which is why this is trying to be forwarded to the Finance Committee to work it out. I don't think anybody's trying to not include anybody. I don't think anybody's trying to not be transparent. I think the reason that we're discussing this in this nature is to get it moved forward so action can be taken. I absolutely agree, and I have 100% confidence in the Finance Committee chair that when we come back for our next meeting, he would report back to the full body what happened, what discussions took place, and what decisions were made in full transparency. And at our upcoming meeting, everything, because it's a public meeting, would be there for the other committee members to watch in deliberations. But I think the reason for moving this forward is because it's time sensitive. There is money that's going to be available to be released into accounts. And if we don't have accounts available, the money's going to sit there. So that's why we're making the motion to move it forward. I have confidence in the Finance Committee's ability to do this. And that's what my recommendation is.
Thank you, Ms. Carroll. Senator McClellan.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to be absolutely clear on what the motion on the table is. Is it what is written and showing on our screens right now, which can be interpreted two different ways? It can be interpreted to say we are delegating this authority to the Finance Committee to not only develop, but implement with no further authorization from the board, or is it to develop and bring back to the board? And I just want to be absolutely clear that the motion in writing in front of us is the same as the verbal motion made by, I believe, Mr. Carroll, so that there is absolute clarity and transparency on what we are voting on right now.
Mr. Parsons, Mr. Gregory, could we have some input on that?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. In answer to Senator McClellan's question, I believe the motion on the floor made by Mr. Carroll and seconded, I believe, by Mr. Peterson is as presented in item B5 in the agenda packet. I believe my interpretation of that is that the authority to implement the strategy is delegated to the Finance Committee. I would recommend, and certainly it would be the prerogative of the CVTA to expect the Finance Committee to report back on the implementation of that strategy, what was done per the delegation of authority, and certainly would work, staff would work with them to see that through.
Mr. Chair, and again, for those who may be watching this meeting who may not have the packet in front of them, the motion that is in the packet is the same as what is being presented on our screen right now. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
If you like, we can read that back.
Would you?
Yes, sir.
Chair, my
Mr. Chair.
question.
Just for clarity. Mr. Gregory, just for clarity.
Yes, sir. The action requested is, and motion was to authorize the CVTA Finance Committee to develop financial policies and procedures and implement a strategy for locality management of key financial management functions on the authority's behalf through negotiation of one or more fiscal agent agreements.
Thank you.
Mr. Gregory, point of order, the second for Mr. Carroll's motion was Mr. Williams, not me.
I apologize. Thank you, Mr. Peter.
Okay. Okay, was there, Mr. Brown, did you have a comment?
Well, I did. I just had a question for Ms. Page and the mayor. I'm unclear as to what their wish was on this issue. So I guess I'd like them to say, did they want it to come back or not come back? I'm unclear as exactly what their intent was.
Well,
Mr. Chair, Mr. Brown. Um, so, so yes, I understand. And just like it appears that others are somewhat confused about the motion that's on the floor. And so do I have confidence in our financial committee? Absolutely. However, with the mayor's comment, and I don't think it's a lack of transparency, but I think that his suggestion or recommendation for the groups was is absolutely critical. And I think that it should be included. And I wanted to make sure that that is something that is included in our policy. So whether we adopt this policy, because I'm hearing that we're adopting this policy so that we can do banking and those kind of processes. However, when it says authorities on the behalf of the authority, then it does not say that the policies will come back to this group. And also it does not say for the purpose of banking, which were the things that Ms. Heater and Mr. Carroll stated. And so with that being said, if the policies and procedures are going to come back to the group and we can implement the recommendation of the financial chair, then I am fine with this, sir.
Well, Mr. Chairman, again, I apologize. Then I think the proposed motion does need to be amended to make it clear, per Senator McClellan's comment, that we would request that those policies come back, that the committee make a recommendation to the board of policies that should be adopted. Now, if there is an exigency with regard to opening bank accounts prior to our next meeting, then I think we can carve that out and authorize that. But I think what I'm hearing is that that some members of the board would like the policies to come back to the body before being finalized. I think as this resolution or motion stands, they would not need to come back before they were implemented. So I would ask Mr. Carroll to consider a modification. Maybe we could ask Mr. Gregory to make a recommendation such that it becomes clear that we expect the policies to come back before finally adopted, before being finally implemented.
Mr. Gregory, this is Matt Harris from Chesterfield. Just maybe as a compromise position. Again, I think from a staff perspective, what we're trying to get the expediency on is the establishment of the bank accounts and really just some audit services, some very basic administrative pieces. So maybe we could find a middle ground where we could pull those, because I can't establish the bank accounts without the disbursement mechanics of getting those money into the accounts. We can easily pull that out of the policies, have the rest of the policies regarding procurement and minority participation, all those other things come back to the full board, but let the finance committee deal specifically with the banking and any audit pieces, just again, those very back office functions, and let the rest of the policies come back. We can cleave those off, and staff is able to do that. And we could turn that around even by Monday morning and still have the finance committee put those pieces in place. Because I think my understanding is the next committee meeting wouldn't be until late January, and you're going to be, really sort of behind the eight ball in terms of the disbursement of those funds, which is from a staff perspective, all we're trying to do. And I think that's a very mechanical, transparent process. There isn't anything to that, and let the rest of the policies come back for broader discussion.
Mr. Chairman, this is Neil Spoonhauer in Guzman County. I just had a question, maybe it's for Mr. Gregory or from a procedural perspective. If we're thinking, I really appreciate the spirit of this conversation, and as one of the smaller localities, I very much appreciate what the mayor's attempting to do. But let's say worst case scenario, the finance team put together something that we didn't agree with. Is there anything that couldn't be undone? Like the authority has the ability to go back if again, say just wildly worst case scenario, something was done that the full committee didn't agree with. I can't think of anything that couldn't be undone that would be that dire that we couldn't move forward on this today.
And Mr. Spoonhauer, are you directing that to the chair? Because
Yes,
my
Mr.
answer would
Chairman, or to Mr. Gregory?
okay, because my answer would be yes, but Mr. Gregory, I don't want to answer for you.
Well, consistent with Mr. Spoonhour's comments, yeah, I believe that what the body may be looking for is a way for, and this is also consistent with what Mr. Harris suggested, and I believe also with what the mayor mentioned, and also what Ms. Page mentioned from New Kent, and also Mr. Brown mentioned, that the idea that the finance committee needs to have some delegated authority to move these processes forward, but that the full authority wants the ability to ultimately decide for instance, the fiscal services agreement and the policies. I believe as a practical matter, the authority could delegate to the finance committee the ability to establish the banking accounts and the audit functions as described by Mr. Harris, and as set forth in the draft fiscal services agreement, just those discrete items. But the finance committee could bring back the policies and procedures to the full body for approval and or ratification upon their recommendation. I think, as Mr. Brown mentioned, we can carve those pieces out if Mr. Carroll and Mr. Williams are amenable to that. If they want to amend their motion or to withdraw their motion in favor of an alternative motion, that can be done so that this could move forward. Does that help?
So, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to propose language if Mr. Carroll's open to that.
Mrs. Spoonhour, did you get your answer?
Yes, I think so, yeah.
Okay.
The chair, Mr. Carroll.
Okay.
To Mr. Spoonhour's point, I think he's absolutely on point that regardless of anything that the finance committee may or may not decide, when it's brought forward to the full committee, it can be voted on and changed. Even though we're extending the authority to the finance committee to make decisions, anybody from any locality can bring it back up at the next meeting and say, I disagree with this decision, and I'd like to have it hashed forward with the full body. Mr. Gregg, would you agree with that?
Certainly the authority has the ultimate power in those kinds of things. The danger is, though, a misunderstanding of authority or something like that, where the finance committee moves something forward, establishes, if it's a policy matter, that's one thing, that's easy to undo. If the finance committee moves forward under a delegation of authority to establish bank accounts, and then the full body wants to undo that's a little bit messier, naturally. So I think the policies and procedures, you could, in order to provide for the mechanics of the disbursements to occur, as Mr. Harris mentioned, you could limit the authority of the finance committee to those discrete functions, and the larger the policy and procedures questions could be subject to ratification or approval by the full authority. To achieve what I believe you're trying to achieve today, you could separate those things out.
So Mr. Chairman, I'd like to propose an amendment to the motion formally, that the language be modified to read that the CVTA Finance Committee is hereby delegated or hereby authorized to take such actions as are deemed necessary to establish banking relationships and audit relationships, and to develop financial policies and procedures which shall be to be recommended to the CVTA at its next official meeting. And so effectively what we're saying is I think it was Mr. Spoonhour that said you can take care of the banking, take care of the audit, establishing audit relationships, although I'm not so clear that that needs to be done immediately. But you can do those two things. Everything else you develop in policy and in draft form, you bring it back to this body for recommendation and consideration. And that would be my motion to amend the existing motion.
Mr. Brown, if I may, Matt Harris from Chesterfield again. The only reason that the accounting and the audit services really need to happen now is we would like to have, those folks beginning to they're gonna be the actual ones distributing the revenues, and then all the records associated with that really need to start from the same place so that we have a clean trail from the very beginning. So that's why I'm advocating that those pieces be coupled together. It's really hard to pull those apart and do them separately. It's all one piece of business. We're really not talking about a whole lot of pieces and parts here.
So I think my language then works. So we're saying the committee would be delegated the authority to establish banking relationships and audit relationships, and to develop policies that will be brought back to the CVTA for its consideration. That's my motion.
I can get behind that.
Second.
Okay. Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt. It seems to me that Mr. Brown's motion is basically to provide for the fiscal agent services as outlined in the draft agreement to provide fiscal services section 1, A, B, C, and D. That would achieve, I believe, Mr. Harris, if you would agree, that would achieve what has been discussed and allow the Finance Committee to move forward with those items. But the remainder of the fiscal agent agreement items and also the draft financial policies and procedures would be subject to further development by the Finance Committee and then recommended approval to the full authority. Is that properly captured?
I think that's right. Now, again, point me, since you're using the agreement for sections, point me to the exact section. I'm looking at the addendum now. What is it under? Which heading? On what page are you referencing? Yeah.
Mr. Parsons, maybe you could help me with that.
Mr. Gregory, I do agree. Those sections that you referenced would cover the essentials that staff feels like we need to get started, and everything else can come back, at a later point and doesn't really delay the business of the authority.
Okay, so just to be clear, we're saying receive, manage, and distribute revenues transferred to the authority. The treasurer of the county will invest. Now, again, which county are we referencing there? I don't. That's unclear to me. But
by the Finance Committee, again, this was a template that the Finance Committee was going to examine and review and work through the data collected by the finance worker.
So, Mr. Gregory, what I would do then, just to not create confusion, is if we leave the language as I stated it, which is authorized to establish bank accounts, I guess, and audit relationships, and not necessarily refer back to this language in the agreement, then I think that leaves it. I think everyone understands the intent there, and we don't get crosswise with the language in this agreement, which may not necessarily be fully vetted.
Understood, Mr. Brown. Thank you.
Mr. Brown, if I might, the fiscal agent agreement is the vehicle that allows the Finance Committee to procure these services. Absent this fiscal agent agreement, we would have to go out for a formal RFP, which was what we were trying to avoid. So there really is no way for us to establish it absent a formal procurement process without this agreement in place.
I would agree with Ms. Coates on that.
Take a step back, Mr. Chair. I want to clarify something that I perhaps should have said at the beginning of the introduction of this item. The intention was to be able to leverage the capacity and the relationships of the CVTA member jurisdictions. And so the idea would be that, just as Ms. Coates just said, the Finance Committee had indicated in an earlier meeting that going through an RFP process to procure banking services that would likely result in the selection of a financial institution that is currently providing services to one or more of our jurisdictions would delay the objectives to be able to receive the revenues on time. And so the thought was that if we could evaluate the banking services relationships among each of the 9 jurisdictions and determine, as Ms. Coates said earlier, the overlap, if you will, we could likely achieve placement of the banking accounts with a financial institution that is deemed appropriate by the member jurisdictions, but also could leverage through Virginia procurement the ability to leverage that agreement with one or more of the localities. So I apologize if that wasn't clear, but as Ms. Coates said, this is intended to be able to provide you the vehicle to leverage those existing relationships that have been procured so that the authority could move more quickly and nimbly to get to operations.
In all due respect, I think that the chair really feels that we've made this much more difficult than it has to be.
Yes.
So could we, what is the most recent motion on this? Mr. Brown, that you had a motion.
Right. So the motion was that we would, and I think the exact language was that the CVTA authorizes the Finance Committee to establish banking relationships and audit relationships and to develop policies to be brought, financial management policies to be brought back to the CVTA at its next meeting. And with that, I think, Ms. Coates, I understand your point, and I think the Finance Committee can finalize this fiscal services agreement in the areas that are identified A, B, C, and D. I don't think the board has to per se adopt this or approve this agreement per se today. So I think with this motion, we're saying Finance Committee led by Mayor Stoney will be able to evaluate this fiscal services agreement, approve it, adopt it, what have you, modify it as need be, but any other policies would need to come back to the body. I think that's what this motion is doing.
That's perfect, yes.
Okay. And Mr. Gregory, your assessment, does that pass the test? Mr. Gregory?
Well, I believe that would be an amendment to Mr. Carroll's original motion. And so Mr. Carroll would have to agree to that.
Does Mr. Chair? Mr. Chair, would it be appropriate if Mr. Carroll will withdraw his motion and let the motion follow? The motion that's just been made by Mr. Brown be the dominating motion here? Because Mr. Chairman, it appeared that there's even though it's similar, but there are some differences here. And so I'm not sure, based on what the first motion that Mr. Carroll was moving forward, if it's still, I guess, apply under these circumstances.
Mr. Carroll.
Well, I would want to, I'm not trying to be difficult here, but so right now everybody's wordsmithing the particular motion that I made. Okay. Based on what was actually, and I went by what was actually drafted by staff, so it would be clear. Apparently it's not. But if I'm going to drop my motion, then I would like to have a written motion so that we can look at it and make sure it's clear and understanding. And so if someone wants to draft that up and we can stand in recess, that's fine. Or we can just vote down my motion. Someone else can make another motion. But I want to see it in writing. If it's so difficult to understand what this basic motion is, which is to authorize the CVTA, I have no problem with pulling out the financial policies and procedures and having them brought back forward. But we need to move this forward so that our accounts can be established and the localities can get their money. So if someone wants to draft it up, that's fine. If you want to vote down my motion, you can vote it down.
Mr. Carroll, I'm gonna type it into the chat and everybody can see it. Hold on just 1 second. Just give me about 60 seconds.
Mr. Chairman, while Mr. Brown is doing this, I would like to ask a simple question. Does this include financial advisors? As 35% of the funds we collect will not be being distributed to other jurisdictions and agencies. Will we be just letting that sit in the account, or will we needing to invest that?
That is part of what, again, this is a very narrow focus. It's banking services, it's the accounting and, related sort of back office things that we need to do to make sure that the audit trail is clean. And then it is the investment advisory services to make sure that those funds are being invested and we're earning a return on those and maximizing those resources. We would like to get all those things done. Everything else can come back. And then we would need the financial policies approved to be able to activate all that stuff. Any other policy related to anything else can come back to the board. We're just asking for this one specific slice for those pieces that I just referenced.
Okay, I see Mr. Brown just added that in, so I think that's good.
Mr. Brown, I would ask to change investment to advisory just to give us, to be able to cover all of our bases. I don't want it to, thank you very much.
Which I just put it in the chat. So if someone needs to suggest a different word somewhere, please do that. And please excuse any typos. I was typing fairly quickly. Not as good as I used to be.
For purposes of the public meeting, I've included it on the screen share. Can everyone see it on the screen share?
Yes.
Okay. The public is not able to see the chat.
Okay.
I think, Ms. Heater, the one piece that's missing there is, again, the advisory piece that would allow us to take care of the investments.
Yeah, I think that covers it. That's everything that we need.
So, Mr. Carroll, for your consideration, but again, we can either proceed either with, I'd move to amend your motion. So I think the appropriate procedure, parliamentary action would be for us to vote on my amendment to your motion. But if you would choose to withdraw and then I could make this as a formal motion, that's appropriate as well.
Mr. Carroll?
Matt Harris, you still on here?
Yes, sir.
Does this satisfy what we need to do to get the accounts and everything moving forward?
It does. The strict financial piece of what we're going to do. There are a lot of things covered in the policies that have been mentioned today that can come back for the broader consideration. And we'll have a clean draft of that available for you, for anyone that wants to see it on Monday. So it's plenty of time to look at it before Wednesday's piece. All the rest of it will be delayed.
I'll amend my motion to this language.
Thank you.
So do we have a second?
Mr. Chairman, Bill Coe. I'm not seconding. I'm asking a question, please.
Please ask your question.
How many motions do we have on the floor right now, and how many amended motions do we have on the floor as we sit here now at this point?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
This is Mr. Gregory. I believe as it stands now, the original motion on the floor from Mr. Carroll has now been, well, it hasn't been amended formally, but he is open to the friendly amendment by Mr. Brown. So the amendment offered by Mr. Brown needs to be voted upon. And then once the amendment is adopted to Mr. Carroll's original motion, then that motion would need to be voted upon. Okay. So if it can be, if the amendment to the motion can be voted upon with a roll call vote, then this Mr. Brown's underlying motion will then be before the board to be voted upon again. And I'm sorry to make that so complicated, but I believe Mr. Brown is absolutely correct that original motion by Mr. Carroll needs to be amended first and then ultimately voted upon.
Okay, in that case, I second the motion for the amendment.
Okay, then, okay, following parliamentary procedure, then we have to vote on Mr. Carroll's motion first.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. No, actually, it's my motion to amend his motion.
It's correct. It's Mr. Brown's motion to amend Mr. Carroll's original motion, which has now been seconded.
Okay.
I'm not sure who made that second, but
Bill Cota, Charles City County did.
thank you.
Okay, so the motion then is one Mr. Brown has made. Okay, that's what did we get a second for that?
Yes, Mr.
I will
Carroll.
second it.
Okay, so this one, now we take a roll call on this one?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Town of Ashland, Mr. Hodges.
I vote aye and appreciate the discussion.
Charles City County, Mr. Cota.
Aye.
Chesterfield County, Vice Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Goochland County, Mr. Spoonhour.
Aye.
Hanover County, Mr. Peterson.
Aye.
Henrico County, Chairman Thornton.
Aye.
New Kent County, Ms. Page.
Aye.
Powhatan County, Mr. Williams.
Aye.
City of Richmond, Mayor Stoney.
Aye.
Delegate McQuinn.
Aye.
Senator McClellan.
Aye.
And CTB, Mr. Brown.
Aye.
Thank you. That concludes the roll call.
So now, Mr. Chair, the motion as amended, Mr. Carroll's motion, original motion, as amended by Mr. Brown and as is shown on your screen, is now before the body for a vote. And I believe it was motioned by Mr. Brown and then seconded. We would need a second.
I will second. Mr. Chairman, I'll second it.
Okay.
David Williams.
Motion has been made and properly second. Roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Town of Ashland, Mr. Hodges.
Aye.
Charles City County, Mr. Cota.
Aye.
Chesterfield County, Vice Chairman Carroll.
Aye.
Goochland County, Mr. Spoonhour.
Aye.
Hanover County, Mr. Peterson.
Aye.
Henrico County, Chairman Thornton.
Aye.
New Kent County, Ms. Page.
Aye.
Powhatan County, Mr. Williams.
Aye.
City of Richmond, Mayor Stoney.
Aye.
Delegate McQuinn.
Aye.
Senator McClellan.
Aye.
And CTB, Mr. Brown.
Aye.
And that concludes the roll call.
Okay, all right, thank you so much. Okay, now we go to C, other business. Any members and their comments? Okay, not hearing any. Let me say, as the chair, that I want to thank each of the commissioners very much and your various and sundry staffs for having put this together, also including Ms. Mueller, Ms. Heater, Mr. Gregory, Mr. Parson, and other persons that we did not see to help put this together. I want to thank them for their input. And I also want to wish to each of them a very safe and prosperous holiday. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And let me also state, as I conclude, one of the things that we are trying to do is to build a solid foundation. And sometimes that foundation is not smooth at every move sometimes, but we are getting there. And I want to thank each of the commissioners who've been coming faithfully or who've been coming even virtually to the meetings and your input. And thank you for using the words like family and being inclusive. That's very important for the CVTA to be successful. Because remember what our objective is we're not doing this for us. We're doing this for the future. And I thank each of you for your collegial approach to this and your belief in what we're doing. It's not anything about any one person or any one locality, but it's about District 15 and also the people that we represent. So I thank you so very much as we get ready for next year. And speaking of that, our next meeting is January the 29th. Can you believe this? 2021. Are there any other comments for anyone else?
Mr. Chair, this is Chad Parsons. I did want to just reconfirm that since we had to go virtual today, we do have an extended invitation from VDOT to host the January 29th meeting at their new Richmond District office. So assuming we are able to gather together again, we're scheduling right now for that January 29th meeting to be at the new at the Richmond District.
Thank you, Mr. Parsons. Anyone else? Okay, then the CVTA is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you and happy holidays to everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Happy holidays.
Merry Christmas.
Joyeux Noël. Feliz Navidad.
Merry Christmas. Thank you all.